Join us, cherished listener, in the unfolding of Romeo's Last Stand, a story that dances to the rhythm of imagination crafted by StoryWave.ai. Become part of our storytelling family by liking, sharing, and subscribing. This story is prompted by a human and generated by patent-pending AI technology developed by StoryWave. Any resemblance to real events, persons, or copyrighted material is purely coincidental. StoryWave does not endorse or promote any specific views, opinions, or actions portrayed in this story. Chapter 1: A Doomed Embrace. I stood within the shadowed alcoves of an ancient sycamore in the Capulets orchard, the evening's breath cool upon my skin. The moon, a silvery crescent, hung low in the ink-washed sky, a silent witness to the clandestine rendezvous that would soon unfold beneath its watchful gaze. The streets of Verona bore an air of unrest, a clamor rising from the city's heart as discord sowed its seeds among the cobblestones. Roe, as I am known amongst kin and companion, felt the weight of my lineage heavy upon my shoulders. The Montague name, a bane to the Capulets' existence, was one I bore with a mixture of pride and sorrow. It was the former that spurred me on this night to defy the feud that had long divided our houses. The rustle of silk announced her presence before I saw her, auburn locks spilling like liquid fire down her back, her form petite against the backdrop of the orchard's blooms. Jules, she was called, a lodestar of rare beauty amidst the encroaching gloom. She approached, her steps carrying her lightly across the earth as a dove might tread upon the wind. "Roe," she whispered, her voice a melody that danced upon the stillness. Our exchange was a clutter of secretive voices and earnest whispers, vows woven between the threads of our shared solitude. "I fear for us," I confessed, my words scarcely more than a breath, "for this enmity that taints our kin." Her gaze met mine, hazel eyes alight with a fire that spoke of resolve. "Then let us be the heralds of a new dawn, Roe. Our love shall be the crucible within which the old hatreds are burned away." A pact was made, our promises to one another a sacred covenant sealed beneath the canopy of night. Yet, even as our souls entwined, the distant clamor of the city grew more insistent, a forewarning of the chaos that crept ever closer. Word had spread of ghastly apparitions haunting the streets, of the dead rising from their eternal slumber to walk amongst the living. Such tales were dismissed as the ramblings of drunkards and madmen, yet the unease that permeated Verona's air suggested a truth too terrifying to contemplate. Our families, entrenched in their bitter conflict, remained oblivious to the shadows that gathered beyond the city's walls. As the Montagues and Capulets clashed with steel and spite, an unspoken alliance was forged between Jules and me in the face of an unfathomable threat. "Strange happenings plague our city," Jules murmured, her voice a wisp of sound amidst the rustling leaves. "Tales of the dead, restless in their graves, have reached even the ears of my father." I nodded, the gravity of her words settling upon me. "We must stand together, Jules. If these omens speak true, then it is not only our love that is imperiled, but all of Verona." The night pressed in around us, a growing sense of urgency threading through the stillness. We knew the dawn would soon part the veil of darkness, returning us to a world where our union was a thing of shadow and secrecy. With a final, lingering touch, a silent vow that spoke more than any words could convey, we parted. She, to the embrace of her family's fortress, and I, to the uncertainty of a city on the brink of pandemonium. As I made my way through the labyrinthine streets, the moon's glow seemed to falter, as though cowering before an unseen menace. The whispers of unrest swelled to a babble, the very stones of Verona echoing with the dread of what was to come. Chapter 2: Forbidden Union. The ancient stones of the church were cold underfoot as I made my way to the sacrosanct confines where our furtive vows would be voiced. The space was ensconced in shadows, the only illumination a flickering candle that cast an eerie glow upon the visage of Friar Lawrence, the solitary soul privy to our union. "Roe," he intoned, his voice echoing with a gravity that seemed to reach beyond the stone walls. "Friar," I acknowledged, my voice barely a murmur, "I entrust thee with the sanctity of this moment, for it is a warning signal of hope amidst the encroaching darkness of our feuding lineage." The heavy oak doors groaned, a prelude to the vision that swept into the chamber like a breath of spring. Jules, garbed in a gown that captured the essence of moonlight, her auburn tresses a cascade of living flame. "Roe," she greeted me, her expression a bastion of resolve. "In this haven of worship, let us weave our destinies together, far from the prying eyes of our kin." Our words to each other, a litany of promises and dreams, were spoken with the solemnity of those who stand on the precipice of a new world. The friar's voice, a sonorous melody, bound us in the eyes of the heavens, our spirits entwining with each resolute syllable. Yet as dawn's first light threatened to unveil our covert espousals, a tempest of whispers and rumors reached our ears. Tales of the deceased, no longer confined to their earthen beds, began to infiltrate the city's consciousness, a disconcerting undercurrent to the already strained relations between our families. The uneasy alliance that was forming behind the scenes, between Montague and Capulet alike, was an indication to the severity of the threat that loomed. An adversary not of flesh and blood, but of the shroud of death itself, compelled our houses to consider an armistice, however tenuous. Roe Jules's voice, now laced with a newfound urgency, "We must away from this place, to lands untouched by the scourge that encroaches. Our love is the compass that shall guide us through this maelstrom." I nodded, taking her hand, the symbol of our unspoken covenant. "Aye, to a refuge where our souls may find solace, and our unity serve as a warning signal for those lost in the throes of despair." As we departed the sanctuary of the church, the cobblestones beneath our feet seemed to whisper of the trials that lay ahead. The distant murmur of discordant cries and the clashing of steel were the harbingers of an inevitable confrontation. Our hearts, bound by a sacrament more potent than the blood feuds that had long ravaged our city, now raced toward a future fraught with uncertainty, but fueled by a love that would not be cowed. In the shadowed recesses of Verona, where the dead were said to tread, our fates were now irrevocably interwoven, an indication to the power of a love that would not be denied its rightful place in the chronology of time. Chapter 3: Harrowing Revelations. I, Roe of the Montagues, found myself standing shoulder to shoulder with men I had long considered adversaries. The air was thick with apprehension, the cobbled lanes awash with torchlight that flickered against the creeping mists. "It's an omen," whispered a Capulet, his visage gaunt, the usual fire of our ancient rivalry extinguished by the shared dread of this new menace. I turned to him, my response measured, my tone devoid of the usual vehemence that colored our exchanges. "Nay, 'tis more than portents and superstition. Verona's dead stir, and we must confront the verity of our plight." The attending throng, a mixture of Montague and Capulet, armed not with the swords of enmity, but with the spears of necessity, cast wary glances toward the city's gates. There, where the boundary between the known and the unthinkable blurred, shapes began to emerge, figures that ambled with an unholy gait, their visages obscured by the pall of night. "Roe," her voice reached me, a thread of certainty in the ragbag of chaos. Jules, her presence a lighthouse in the tumult, stood resolute, the flame of her hair a palpable gap against the darkness. "Jules," I acknowledged, "our kin must unite, for the adversary we face knows not of feuds or bloodlines." A Capulet elder, his visage etched with the lines of many winters, stepped forward, his voice resonant within the hush that had befallen our assembly. "Then let it be so. Montague, Capulet, we stand together against this scourge." Murmurs of accord rippled through the crowd, a tentative pact forming amidst the uncertainty of our predicament. "We must fortify," I proposed, my words directed to all who would listen. "Barricade the streets, protect the innocent. Our quarrel is not with each other, but with the abyss that encroaches." The task at hand was monumental. The dead, entities devoid of soul or reason, advanced with relentless purpose. Their groans, a hub of despair, became the anthem of our besieged city. Roe, the eastern wall, called out a voice, its owner a young Montague whose name escaped me in the fervor of the moment. I hastened to the indicated location, Jules at my side, her silhouette a constant in the whirlwind of our endeavors. The barricades erected were but a fragile barrier against the relentless tide of the undead. The assembly worked with fervor, the clatter of wood and the ring of metal a symphony of survival. Yet as we endeavored to fortify our defenses, the reality of our situation became ever more apparent. Verona, the jewel of our existence, was now the stage for a conflict far beyond the scope of any family dispute. as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, casting a pale glow upon the faces of friend and former foe alike, the gravity of our situation settled upon us. The city of Verona was no longer just a battleground for the hearts of star-crossed lovers. It had become the last bastion against a tide of darkness that threatened to engulf us all. In the face of such a foe, our forbidden love was but a single note in the symphony of chaos. But it was a note that carried the weight of hope, a melody that would not be silenced by the shadows that sought to consume us. Chapter 4: A Pledge Against Darkness. In the dwindling light, the silhouette of Juliet, my clandestine betrothed, appeared beside me, her face set with the grim determination of one who understands the magnitude of our plight. Our whispered counsel, under the cover of a shattered portico, was a confluence of desperation and resolve. Roe, Juliet's voice cut through the din of chaos. We must act, lest all be lost to this scourge. I nodded, my mind racing to forge a plan from the fragments of hope that yet lingered. We shall lead a charge, I decreed, a foray to stem this tide and reclaim the heart of Verona from the grasp of perdition. The Montagues and Capulets, houses once divided by ancient grudges, now stood united by necessity in the face of this shared adversary. The patriarchs of our families, men of stature and pride, gathered in the shadow of the city's defenses, their visages marked by the toll of relentless skirmishes. We must unite, for Verona's sake, I proclaimed, my voice echoing off the walls that had withstood centuries but now faltered before this new terror. Juliet, standing resolute by my side, added, Our love may be forbidden, but our will to protect our kin surpasses all bounds. The assembly, a congregation of worn and battle-weary souls, met our words with nods of grim acceptance. A truce was struck, not with the flourish of quills or the exchange of gold, but with the clasp of hands and the shared knowledge that our survival hung by the thinnest of threads. As the dead, those once our neighbors and friends, now twisted into grotesque parodies of life, clawed at the barricades, we mounted our defense. Juliet and I, side by side, led the charge, our voices raised not in cries of love, but in the call to arms. To arms, the cry resounded, taken up by every able-bodied man and woman who had chosen to make a stand. Our foray into the throng of the undead was a maelstrom of steel and resolve. We fought not for the honor of our names, but for the breath of life that still lingered in our city's lungs. The fight was brutal, a dance with death itself, as we reclaimed, inch by hard-fought inch, the streets that had cradled our youths, our dreams. The Montagues and Capulets, shoulder to shoulder, forged a bulwark against the encroaching darkness. As the sun cast its first rays over the desolate expanse of Verona, a moment of respite was granted. We, the living, took stock of our losses, our gains, and the understanding that our battle was far from over. In the stillness that followed, the true test of our allegiances arose. Would our union hold against the strain of the night's horrors, or would the ancient feud resurface to fracture the fragile peace we had wrought? The answer lay not in words, but in the shared glances between those who had fought, in the silent acknowledgement that the love which dared not speak its name had become the rallying cry for the salvation of Verona. Chapter 5: Twilight's Edge. I found myself perched upon the remnants of a crumbled parapet, gazing out into the encroaching night. Beside me, Juliet's figure was a stark reminder of all that was at stake. Our whispered conference was punctuated by the distant moans of the undead, a grim chorus for our deliberations. Roe, Juliet began, her voice a mere thread amidst the tumult of our doomed city. The hour is late, and hope dwindles with the waning light. What path lies before us, when even the dawn brings no solace? Her query hung between us, unanswered, as I surveyed the desolation that stretched before our eyes. We have stood against the tide of darkness, I replied, fought with the strength of 10. Yet now, even I must confess that our plight grows ever more dire. The notion of flight, of abandoning the city to its fate, was anathema to all I had believed, all I had fought for. But the specter of a fruitless end, of lives snuffed out without a trace or testament, pressed upon us with the inevitability of nightfall. There may yet be a passage, I murmured, a hidden route beneath the city, forgotten by all but the most ancient of our line. It may serve as our avenue of escape. Juliet's countenance, illuminated by the flickering torchlight, bore no sign of the turmoil that such a decision wrought. "And of our houses?" she inquired. "What of the Montagues and Capulets, who even now cast aside ancient grudges to face this common foe?" "To remain would be to consign ourselves to oblivion," I said, my words devoid of the fervor that once defined them. Our departure could grant them a chance, a respite to fortify and endure. We stood in contemplation, the gravity of our conversation a pronounced polarity to the din of battle that echoed from the streets below. The decision to flee, to seek survival beyond the confines of our beleaguered home, was one fraught with the specter of cowardice, yet it was a choice we could not dismiss lightly. As we descended from our vantage point, the clamor of our kinship, rallying against the darkness, reached our ears. The Montagues and Capulets, united in purpose, if not in spirit, continued to hold the line against the relentless advance of the undead. The bond between our families, once as tenuous as a spider's web, had been tempered in the crucible of shared adversity. Yet, Juliet and I were of a different accord, our love a clandestine flame that could not be acknowledged in the light of day, nor in the shadow of death. We traversed the city's labyrinthine passageways, every step a silent testament to the choice that lay before us. To remain was to embrace a demise that loomed inevitable. To flee was to grasp at a future uncertain and fraught with the unknown. Our course was set, and as the last vestiges of twilight surrendered to the encroaching darkness, we made our way to the hidden ingress that promised deliverance from the hell that Verona had become. The edge of twilight was upon us, and with it, the decision that would define our existence. Chapter 6. Undying Love. I, Roe, alongside Juliet, stood on the battlements, the cool morning air carrying with it the promise of a new beginning. It was here, among the stones that had witnessed the rise and fall of so many, that the survivors of our two houses gathered, their countenances marked by the shared ordeal that had been thrust upon us. "See how the horizon ignites with the fire of dawn," Juliet spoke, her words not betraying the turmoil that had transpired, a symbol, perhaps, of hope. I cast my gaze upon the gathered assembly, the Montagues and Capulets intermingled, their former enmity a faint memory against the backdrop of our shared fight for existence. "Hope, indeed," I replied, "for it is not the light of the sun alone that kindles the fire within us, but the shared flame of our invincible spirit." An elder of the Capulets, his hair as white as the marble of the tombs that now housed many of our kin, stepped forward. "Roe, Juliet, you have shown that unity is not merely a concept to be bandied about in times of peace, but the very sinew and bone that holds us together in the face of annihilation." His words, free of the bitter dialect that once characterized our interactions, carried the weight of truth. We stood divided, and it nearly cost us all. But united, we have endured. Let this mark the inception of a Verona reborn, not from the ashes of our feud, but from the embers of our alliance. Juliet's hand found mine, our fingers intertwining, a silent affirmation of our bond. "Let us then pledge," she proposed, her voice steady as the stone beneath our feet, "to rebuild not just the walls that shelter us, but the bonds that define us." The affirmation of our unity was not marked by cheers or proclamations, but by the solemn nodding of heads, the clasp of hands, and the silent decisiveness that filled each survivor's eyes. In the days that followed, the labor of rebuilding commenced. Stones were lifted, streets cleared, and the dead laid to rest with the dignity they deserved. The menace that had sought to claim Verona was vanquished, but its legacy would forever be etched in our memories. As the sun arced across the sky, its trajectory a hidden guardian to our toil, I found myself amidst the ruins of the Capulet estate, where Juliet and I had forged our secret covenant. The grounds, once resplendent with the hues of 1,000 flowers, lay desolate, a stark reminder of the fragility of life. "Roe," a voice called out, its timbre a familiar comfort. It was Benvolio, cousin and childhood companion, his countenance weary but his eyes alight with the vigor of purpose. "Benvolio," I greeted him, "what news dost thou bring?" "From the east, travelers come," he reported, bearing tidings of other cities, of other lands that have faced the darkness and prevailed. They speak of alliances, of knowledge shared and wisdom gained. The notion of a world beyond Verona, of communities and civilizations that had weathered the same storm, ignited within me a curiosity, a desire to reach beyond the confines of our city and seek out these kindred spirits. We shall welcome them, I declared, for in their stories may lie the keys to ensuring that such a scourge never again darkens our doorsteps. Juliet joined us, her presence a silent testament to the enduring love that had become the heart of our new world. Together we shall learn, grow, and fortify not just our defenses, but the very essence of our humanity. And so, as twilight gave way to night and the stars unveiled themselves above, Verona stood not as a city divided by hatred, but as a lantern of unity, a testament to the undying love that had guided us through the abyss and into the light of a new era. The pursuit of knowledge, of understanding, became our creed, and in the shared wisdom of a world reborn, we found the truest expression of our love, a love undying, not just in the hearts of two, but in the soul of a city, undaunted and unyielding. The end. This story is generated by patent-pending AI technology developed by StoryWave. Any resemblance to real events, persons, or copyrighted material is purely coincidental. StoryWave does not endorse or promote any specific views, opinions, or actions portrayed in this story. We're delighted you spent this time with us on Romeo's Last Stand. StoryWave AI brings your prompts to life, creating stories that resonate. Don't forget to hit like, share with friends, and subscribe for daily doses of storytelling magic. April 2024. Until next time.